Morning guys, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. What I'd like to do today is introduce you to the newest Mora knife. It will release today for sale and pre-order on our website at selfrelianceoutfitters.com. We have exclusivity to the first 100 units that will be entering the US, and we'll take pre-orders for those starting today. You can go to our website to pre-order this blade. There will not be any available probably in the US for shipment until early March. But we will have the first 100 when they do hit the States, and you can start to pre-order those today. As you know, Mora released a stainless steel version of a knife called the Garberg approximately 2 years ago. And I tested that knife very thoroughly before its release, and I have used and abused it since then. It's been a knife that I've carried the majority of the time in combination with another Mora that was carbon steel, so that number one, I had a smaller blade for skinning, and number two, I had a carbon steel blade on me all the time, because that's always been kind of one of my things. I want a carbon steel blade on my body if I can get it. And so to that end, Mora has been working for the last couple years on process improvements to be able to produce a full tang carbon steel knife. And today I'd like to introduce you to the full tang carbon steel Garberg. I'm going to show you some pictures of both of these knives up close. Both of these are prototypes, but they are exactly like the knife that you will receive, minus the fact that this one has my name on it and says prototype number 1. I have abused and used this knife, and you can see by the video segments that I've added to this video that it will do all the things that I expect from a survival type knife. And that's one thing that I think needs to be differentiated with this knife and in this video, because I see a lot of confusion in videos and on the web about the design intent of a knife. And you must realize that the Garberg was designed as a one tool option style survival knife. If you lost for some reason everything else and only had the knife on your hip, it should be able to perform the 5 critical tasks that it needs to do to be able to help you in the short term with your survivability, and act very much like some of the other tools you may be carrying. It needs to be able to split and process firewood. It needs to act as a fire starting device. It needs to be able to scrape kindling materials and be able to process fat wood. It needs to be able to scrape a Ferrocerium rod with the spine and yet strike sparks with the spine in a hard rock if needed. It needs to be able to fell small saplings for structural poles to make shelters. And it also needs to be able to do fine carving work, like making notches in fireboards and notchings for pieces and parts of components that will be placed and lashed together to make them structurally strong. All of those things are the capability of a knife like the carbon steel Garberg, as well as its ability to be pried back and forth if needs be, to pry bark, to split open rotten woods to get to the center, whether it's to get to drier materials or punky woods, or even to get to food sources like termites and different types of insect larvae. And the Mora Garberg, in both stainless and carbon, are both capable of those tasks, other than the stainless steel version will not strike sparks, being that it's not carbon, unless you use a different style rock that has an iron content like iron pyrite, in which case you're throwing sparks from the rock and not the blade itself. But the carbon steel Garberg allows you to strike flint, quartz, chert, and things like that off the blade, as demonstrated in this video in a minute. You know, for me, a carbon steel knife has always been something that I have promoted as a must carry, especially for your belt knife. And this carbon steel Garberg is no exception to that rule. It allows you to use it as an alternate fire starting device, because it can now be used as a flint and steel, being that it has a high carbon content and a good Rockwell hardness. Now, carbon also has the advantage of being easier to sharpen in the field, but that advantage of being able to be used for a fire starting device truly sets it apart, in my mind, from other blades. So if I've got a normal fire steel, like this Hudson Bay fire steel, and a piece of flint, I can obviously strike this and throw sparks to enable me to light charred materials and put them into a bird nest to blow a fire. If I don't have this, and all I have is the charred material, which I can make from any natural material in the wild, or I can make it from clothing that I'm wearing that's made of cotton. A cotton bandana that I'm carrying and things like that. Then I can take that charred material that I've got, which would be my next fire mentality, because I would always make that charred material right off the bat with my very first fire. And now I can take that charred material and lay it out to kind of increase the surface area of where my sparks can land. And what I generally do with a knife when I'm trying to start a flint and steel fire with a knife is I pin the charred material down to an object like a stump, and I then strike sparks down onto that material. So this, up until this day, I believe, is the best knife for this application that Morakniv has ever made. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, and for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends, and from also my family and friends at Morakniv. We thank you for your support.